Hey everyone, I'm joined by Donna McAvoy, 2D animator, illustrator, and motion designer. Donna brings a fun and unique style to her work through character design, from corporate styles to more whimsical designs such as Scottish dinosaurs and animated dragons. I'm excited to be diving into how she ideates her characters and brings them to life through motion and traditional animation. Donna, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So, it's very easy to see based on your website, your show reel, everything, that you have years of experience with character animation. I'd love to kind of know what, at the end of the day, inspired you to get into character animation.
I think I was actually originally studying civil engineering when I first left school. And I don't know, I just wasn't feeling like I could see myself doing that as a career. And I went to this exhibition. I feel like a lot of people might have had this experience where it was like a Pixar exhibition of 20 years or 25 years, I can't remember, but it was all concept art and all the behind the scenes stuff that I didn't actually know much about. I love animated films and things like that, but I didn't know how characters came to be or just the behind the scenes stuff. And I was like, oh man, I would love to do something like that because I always loved drawing. But it was something that I stopped doing as a teenager and then never really got back into it. And I feel like that was the start of me thinking I would just love to do something where I love doing it every day. So I ended up switching from engineering to a computer arts course, which was very general and had a bit of 3D modelling and 2D animation and game design and things like that. It was very general, so I think I just went from there basically, and I've always loved the character side of it, so I try and keep that going in my personal projects when I can anyway. Yeah.
I love that. It's really interesting because over the years, as I've talked to various designers, animators, so forth, a lot of them not a lot of them, but there is a consistent theme where they were either at one point engineers or at one point in the medical, kind of the medical courses, things like that. And they end up switching over to design. You talked a little bit about how you saw kind of behind the scenes for Pixar, kind of the courses and so forth for that. But I'd love to dive a little bit more. What was it that piqued your interest? Was there a specific element that made you go, hey, I'm switching out of engineering, we're going all in on the design?
I don't know. I think maybe just there was a lack of, or I seen it as a lack of creativity in the engineering stuff that I was doing. And I feel like maybe that wouldn't necessarily need to be the case because there's a lot of creative jobs in engineering as well. But just the playfulness of it, I think. Being able to come up with things and just create them from nothing sort of thing. So yeah, I don't think there was anything super deep about it, but I was super jealous of anyone that was this is their job, and I'm like, why am I not doing that then if I really I'm jealous of other people who do that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
No, it does, and I would say that's deep. It's you're looking at what you're doing, you're going, hey, I don't feel like this is what I want to do. This isn't creative, things like that. And if you're a creative person, then it's a great opportunity to bring that engineering side of your brain over to the creative side. And I'm sure that helps out when it comes to understanding tools, kind of processes, and that kind of structure on that end. On that note, I'd love to dive a little bit more into your process when you are creating characters or even just animating characters. What's your workflow like?
It really depends on whether it's a client project or a personal project. I'd say they're very different processes for me. So with client work, mostly I'll come in when there's already a script around. So they'll have an idea of if there's going to be characters in it and who they are and what their purpose is. So from there, if they have ideas of what they want it to look like, then I'll work from that. Otherwise, I'll create a mood board, just using Pinterest or something like that to find, sometimes it's corporate and sometimes it's more playful, if it's directed towards kids or adults or whoever. So mood boards, and then once I have an idea of what the client is looking for, I'll sometimes start in my sketchbook. If it's something that I'm not comfortable drawing and I haven't really drawn before, I think it's good to start on paper and just sketch out ideas and then work it up. in either Photoshop or Illustrator before sharing with the client. But sometimes I will just share sketchy things. It depends how particular the client is about the character design, because a lot of the time they're happy with just very generic corporate style characters that are like vector and flat. But other times, if they want them to be more emotive, they'll want particular, like they need to have eyebrows so they can be expressive, or things like that, color palettes and texture and things. So it does depend on the client, but I will always kind of start with a mood board first before drawing anything, because if you start sending over drawings and it's taking a lot of time to do them, and then the client's like, oh no, I hate all this. Or yeah, so it's better to get reference from other places first, I think.
When you are working on client projects, have you ever ran into situations where you have shown the client sketches, they're aware of what the character design is going to be like, you get to the end of the project, and now they're saying, hey, we want to redo the characters. We don't really like how they look at the overall composition now.
I don't think I've ever had that, very luckily, because that would be a right pain. So I think if that situation ever came up, it would need to be a discussion about, well, we'll have to charge extra for this because we're now going back so many steps in the process. So I think it's important. I usually work for agencies or like video production companies and smaller studios. So there's normally a producer or someone in between me and the client. So they're very good at getting sign off at each stage. So storyboards, designs, and then animation. So if any major changes happen after those initial stages, then it's going to cost extra, basically. Like minor things are fine, like changing hairstyles, colours, like clothes they're wearing, as long as it's something that can be easily tweaked. But if it's something that's like going to require a whole new rig, or if it's hand drawn, that's like the whole project would be redone basically. So yeah, it would just need to be a discussion about how much extra time it will now cost to go back and change the character from the beginning. So
that makes sense, and I'm glad that you haven't ran into scenarios like that, in which case, I'm assuming based off that you have a pretty good process on your end then. When you are talking to clients, how do you determine when it's okay to show them sketches and when you kind of just have to say, okay, we need to show them the final design because they may not get the sketches?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of the times it will, like, the producer kind of decides that, but like I'll talk to them and say, like, I will be doing sketches. Do you want me to share them with the client, or do you think that's just going to confuse them because it's not going to be what the final thing looks like? So I think it's only if they are quite particular about the character I would share sketches, just to get an idea, because they're quicker to do than working it up in final colour and things like that. You can just send the sketches over, and even if they're not what they want, you can then learn, okay, we don't want it to look like this. So it just helps to steer you in a direction a bit quicker. Yeah, I think just a lot of my process is on my website as well, so I can even just say to the client, like, it's going to look like this, but be assured that the final thing won't look as sketchy or rough as this. So as long as they're open to that. But yeah, a lot of them, I would say mostly what happens is I'll share character designs or style frames at the storyboard stage, just one or two, so they can see what's going to happen and then maybe what it'll look like as a final. So because the storyboards are always just roughly sketched out, so it helps reassure them that the final piece won't be like that.
When you're creating storyboards, do you have like a template file that you've created where it's like, this is how the storyboard's always going to look? Or is it kind of just, we're going to create storyboards on the fly, and that's just, we'll see what the design looks like at the end of the day?
I will try to get the storyboards to look like the final design. I'll try and get as close as possible, like the layout of things on the screen, and if we have a rough idea of the character proportions, even things like that. And even if we haven't decided on the character design, I'll try and put little things in, like, oh, this character's obviously male or female, so they can call out, oh, we actually want that to be different. Because it might be things the client hasn't actually thought about, and until they see the storyboard, they realise, oh no, that's not what we want. So yeah, I'll try and put some detail into it. even just enough to raise a discussion about whether it's right or wrong is, yeah. But for like technically, I'll just draw my storyboards in Photoshop, and then I've now started just using Google Slides to do them. So every slide is a separate frame, so it's easy to just stick ones in between if, you know, we come back to version 2 and there's more frames needed or some taken out and things like that. And it's just really easy to adjust that way.
You mentioned that you create your storyboards in Photoshop, and I'm curious as to why, because I feel like there's so many different tools out there. It's like Photoshop, Illustrator. Some people use things like Fresco even, or Fresco, whichever one it's called. And you also have the one on iPad as well. I forget. Their other app is Dreams. Was it Procreate?
Procreate, yeah.
Yeah, and I would love to know, like, why for your workflow do you choose Photoshop?
For me, it's just because it's easy to sketch. I like drawing in Photoshop. Like Illustrator, it would be too, like, vectors I don't think would be the right style, because I want to keep it loose and sketchy, and it's quicker just to do that in Photoshop. And it's also on my computer, so like I use my iPad, I use Procreate a lot for personal stuff, but I think when I'm doing client projects, I just really like to be at my desk and like focused and have a bigger screen because my iPad's super small. But otherwise, Procreate would be good for doing storyboards, because I always just export them as PNGs anyway and then drop them into like Google Slides. Or I used to use a software called Boards, like Boords, but their pricing went way up, so I stopped using that and just use Slides. But yeah, I just like to export everything as PNGs, and then I can chop and change what I want quite easily.
Yeah, it feels like prices across the board are going up for tools so much nowadays, and it's like it's just like, dang, like, do y'all know who used the product? Oh yes. Awesome. So I want to take a step back though and go really early into the production process talk again, and I'd love to know a little bit more about your rigging process with characters. Do you have like specific tools like Duik that you're using, or they're like just situations of like, we're going to use Duik sometimes?
Yeah, I would say probably Rubber Hose is the one that I use the most for character limbs and things like that. And joysticks and sliders if they have to have like a head turning. And I know like Limber is very similar to Rubber Hose, but I had a discussion actually with a few other motion designers about this a few months ago, about which one I should use for a specific project, but it just felt like the benefits of Limber and then the time it would take me to learn a new one compared to Rubber Hose just didn't really. It was basically like nothing in it, so I just used Rubber Hose again. But I find rigging in After Effects very frustrating, and not so much the creating the rigs, but when you're animating it can be very restrictive. So I try to do a mix between rigging and sometimes like frame by framing bits if it just doesn't work with shape layers. And another way I do it is just by parenting limbs, like parenting the forearm with the upper arm and the shoulder and things like that, because I think it can always be quicker. Like if you're not going to reuse a character over and over again, I think it's quicker just to make a like parented rig for one. Like if it's a one-time thing, so making the rigs can be a bit time consuming, and then when they don't want them to do what you need them to, it's very frustrating. But yeah, I also just think I'm possibly not that good at rigging.
Don't say that, Donna.
to dive in a little bit more.
Definitely. And I know I'm not super versed on rigging. It's just something that I've always kind of seen. I'm like, cool, like I understand this is like its own focus, and I understand like its own like pool to swim in and things like that. And one of the things you mentioned is just like the different tools, and is it worth switching from one to another? And just from even on an outside perspective, I look at it, I'm like, Duik looks very complicated to me. Rubber Hose looks like it doesn't transfer to like joysticks and sliders, but then I'll see some people use joysticks and sliders in like very like creative ways. And I imagine all these tools are like extremely robust. I would love to kind of know, ultimately, why did you choose Rubber Hose?
It's not going to be that good an answer. It was just basically one of the first ones that I learned how to use, and then I got comfortable with it, so I just stuck with it, I guess. And I don't think I've even upgraded it, because I know it's went from like Rubber Hose 2 now, so there are some improved things, but I just haven't been using the tools that much these days that I've felt the need to upgrade them, sort of thing. But yeah, I think in general I'm moving a bit away from rigs and just moving things around manually and keyframing it, because I think you can almost get more like natural movements and things like that way, and that's more a direction I want to move into, I think. So rather than your like doing auto walk cycles and things like that, because yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was talking to an artist the other day, and he was trying to implement 3D into his work. And he typically does like traditional 2D, and he talked about how like it was such a timely, like it was such a costly process time wise to figure out how to make the 3D look like as if it was 2D instead. And so he ultimately was like, it's not saving me any time, it's actually costing me a lot of time. So he switched back to like traditional animation styles. And I think that's really interesting to hear that from you as well, that there are times where it's just like it just takes too much time to set the rig up or things like that, when you can get in, pretty much get it done pretty quickly manually and get out if you need to.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's pivot a little bit. You mentioned that you talked a little bit working for agencies and so forth. I'd love to know a little bit more about, like, for you, like, how do you build your relationship with agencies?
For me, like, a lot of them came via LinkedIn, I think. And most of the agencies I work for are based in Scotland, so they're quite local to me. And I feel like maybe they just found me from searching for like Scottish animator or Scottish motion design. And yeah, that's how I've got a lot of them, I would say. But some were via like networking events. So not specifically like hiring me on the spot, but going along to networking events, I've met some people, and so they're then aware of me, and if an animation project comes up, then they have me in mind, sort of thing. I did, when I started freelancing, send out a lot of cold emails, so been down that route as well. So some of them came to fruition, most of them didn't, but it's amazing when you send an email out and then like 2 years later someone will reply like, oh hey, we've got some work. So sometimes you'll do the cold emails and think it's not working, but somebody's actually added you to a freelance list somewhere and they might pop up again sometimes. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the agencies you currently work with, is it fair to say that they've been pretty long-term partnerships for you?
Yeah, most of them are. So this year, I think most of my work came from like 2 or 3 clients that I've been working with for years. And then I've got another new one who I think could be a new one like that that'll come back again and again. So yeah, it's definitely good to have some core clients that keep you afloat, and then more like novelty projects in between, I guess.
I'm sure that from their perspective, they probably have people who are constantly reaching out to them looking for work. And the fact that they continue to go back to you, I think, is number one, a testament towards your quality and working with you. But number two, I'd love to learn a little bit more ultimately from your end. What do you attribute to the core success of them coming back to you consistently?
I think probably just making sure you're always available when you say you're going to be. So at the start of projects, like making clear what days you can work or what deadlines, like setting up deadlines in advance and making sure you always meet those. And just being in communication, like when I've finished a version 1, always sending it on and making sure there's time for the agency to feed back to me before they have to send it to the client and things like that. And yeah, I think just when they give you feedback, just acting on it, like not trying to push back too hard. If it's not something that's like you're saying changing characters at the end of the project or something like that, you know, if it's a lot of small little notes, just get them done. It's always quicker just to do them than argue with them about it. And not taking feedback personally ever, just, it's the client possibly has reasons why they want things to be certain colours or small little tweaks here and there, and I don't know, I just don't think it's worth questioning it sometimes if it's not going to be a detriment to the overall piece. So yeah,
I love that because you're talking about this choosing your battles essentially, and when it's worth that. And I think that for anybody who is starting out, that can be a difficult hurdle to go over, because sometimes realistically, sometimes you can see your work get butchered by the client's feedback. And you have to remind yourself at the end of the day, you're like, okay, cool. Like, this is what the client's paid for. This is what they want. And there are times where it's just, you have to be okay with that. And I think that can definitely be a hurdle for many people starting out, or anybody who's very possessive about their work. I'd love to know a little bit more about your personal work though, with your characters, because we talk about the corporate, we talk about agency and stuff like that. But I think one of the places where a lot more of your whimsical designs get to shine is in your personal work. And so I'd love to know, when you're coming up with these creative characters, these Scottish dinosaurs, the angry rat who's like yelling and his house is like falling down, things like that. How do you come up with those ideas and those characters?
Okay, so they're so different, but a lot of the personal projects that I did, especially last year, there was like a reason for them. So a lot of them were kind of like challenges, motion challenges, like Monday's challenge have a thing where it's like a weekly prompt they have, and you can make something within that week along that theme. So it was the year of the dragon last year, so that was the reason for a couple of dragon animations. The mouse it's a community challenge by Clanimation, who are like a Scottish animation network, and they wanted something in the theme of Robert Burns, the Scottish poet. So there's one that he's written that's to a mouse. So I just knew I wanted to do a mouse because I love like animating characters that are animals and little daft cute things. So I thought that would be perfect for that. So there's always been like a reason to choose a specific, like a dragon, a mouse, or like the dinosaur is Nessie from the Loch Ness Monster. So
I love that.
Once I've got that in my head, it is much more sketching in my sketchbook for personal projects, I would say. And I'll draw from sometimes from realistic, I'll Google mice and draw some mice from photos. And then sometimes I'll take other artists' work that I like and kind of copy them in my sketchbook, just to be like, okay, what do I like about this? And try and then draw on my own with that knowledge in my head from the real stuff and the other artists' work, and then try and find shapes that work for me, and also in my mind keeping it animatable so it doesn't get too complicated or anything like that, just keeping it simple and something that I can animate in a couple of days, because most of those challenges have very short deadlines, or they're just something that I don't want to spend too much time on. And that's where the iPad comes in really good, because I can do it on the sofa while I'm watching TV, and that way it doesn't feel like work. So yeah, that's a much more fun way to do it, I would say.
That's awesome. And my apologies for calling it a rat. It is a mouse.
Yeah. Oh, he doesn't identify specifically as either. He's just a mouse or a rat.
For your sketchbook, where you're drafting characters and brainstorming and things like that, you mentioned that you do it when you watch TV sometimes. Do you also take it when you're traveling or things like that, or is it just it strictly stays at the home and then that's kind of like the brainstorm area?
Yeah, it's just stayed at home. I've tried taking sketchbooks when I've been on holidays and things like that before, but I'll maybe draw one or two things in the airport and then never look at it again for the rest of the trip. So I've tried that, but I don't think that's for me right now. I think I'm not always the best at drawing. I need to be in a certain mood for it to turn out great, to be really focused. And I think when I'm traveling, there's just too much going on and I'm distracted, and yeah, I don't know. I need to have a reason to be doing it, I think.
I feel that. There are times where I'm sitting down designing a graphic and I'm just I just can't think of anything. And so I have to use like, there's certain methods, like I'll have like go-to songs or something like that, or playlists, things like that. I'd love to know, when you're dealing with creative blocks, how do you typically overcome them?
I think the music that you mentioned is a good one. So there have been some personal things that I'm working on and I just can't get an idea. And I know that I want to have like a soundtrack or whatever to it. So I'll go on like Pixabay or whatever free site I can use because it's a personal project and I don't want to pay a lot of money. So, and then sometimes I'll find a piece that's really like, I'm like, yeah, this is the energy that I want for this animation. So that then spurs me on to think, what could it be doing that would match with this? And then other times it will just be sketching or even just scrolling on Pinterest or even Instagram, just like if you can't be bothered or don't feel in the mood to be drawing, like because you feel as if you don't have the ideas yet, so it's just going to be a waste of time. Just looking at things and creating like a Pinterest board can be inspiring to me, I feel like, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I like what they're doing and I want to make something in a similar vein. So yeah, a few different ways, and I think sometimes just forgetting about it for a night or whatever and watching your favourite shows or playing games or whatever, and a thought will come out of nowhere when you least expect it. And yeah, but when that doesn't happen, you have to just open up the apps, get out the sketchbook and force yourself to do it, especially if you're on the deadline.
Yeah, just had to power through it basically. Are you more of a creative in the morning or creative at night person?
Probably night, I would say. Yeah, I've sort of disciplined myself that I'll just need to work on client work anytime, like during the day. When I start at 9, then I'll do whatever needs done. And I will try and get the more difficult tasks out the way in the morning. So I feel like storyboarding is one that you've kind of got to think about a lot more. It's probably like the most thinking heavy part of the process for me because you're working out transitions and things like that. So I like to get that out of the way before I'm tired. But most personal projects I'd say happen in the evening, like after dinner when I'm just watching TV, and I'll pick up the iPad or whatever and start sketching. And yeah, that's where I feel like I can be more creative because there's nothing left to do in the day. So it's like all the work's out the way, I've had dinner, all that stuff's done, so I can just mess around and it doesn't matter if nothing comes from it, sort of thing.
I think it can be fairly easy to fall into the trap of doing the day job, stopping at the end of the day, and you're pretty much tired or burned out or something, and you kind of just eat food, watch TV, go to sleep, call it a day. How do you like prep yourself back up to do creative work later in the day after your day work?
For me, it's like, I think it only happens when I've spent too long just vegging out and watching TV and I start to feel restless. So I watch a lot of like trash TV, like Selling Sunset.
Okay, same. What do you watch?
Like Selling Sunset and like Love is Blind, all those Netflix.
Yeah.
So I love watching them for the drama, but there is a lot of like tedious stuff in it. So I quite enjoy being able to like get my iPad out and I'm not fully paying attention to the show, but I'm also not fully paying attention to the iPad. But like, I don't know, it's just more fun that way, I feel like. If I spent like a long stretch of just watching TV, then I feel like, okay, I need to do something. My brain is turning to mush just watching this stuff. So yeah, it's like a need almost.
I feel that. If I'm working on like a puzzle, I'll get to the point where I'm like, all right, I have to go do something else. Or if I'm watching TV, like Love is Blind, for example, I have to, like, I skip the pods. I feel like it's a sin to do that, but I literally skip the pods for the most part. Because it's just like, it's so much intro, especially the first 2 episodes. I'm just like, oh, come on, let's get to the gritty of it. So we're coming at the end of this, but I want to kind of ask, overall, for anyone who has never dipped into character design, animation, anything like that, what's a piece of advice for them? Like, what should they do first to get started?
Oh, that's quite hard. I think just having fun with it. Like, if there's people look down on like fan art and things like that. And like, to be honest, I've not done a lot of that, but I think it's how a lot of people end up getting into animation and things like that. So if there's something you like really love and you just want to draw that, then like just do that, and it'll sort of steer you towards a style that you might like. Like, it'll eventually evolve into your own style. And just, yeah, like, just having fun, because once you start working, you're going to be doing things for clients and things that where you don't have a lot of say over what something looks like, or like, don't worry too much about it being perfect or being anatomically correct or anything like that, because I think that was something that scared me a lot when I was learning about animation. Was, oh my god, you have to be like an anatomy expert and know where all the muscles are and things like that. And it's like, there's so many styles of animation where you don't even have to think about that. Like, everything I do is just kind of blobby and doesn't have a bone structure. It just has wiggly arms or whatever. So yeah, just play around, and there's so many resources on YouTube for free now as well that you can dip into without spending any money and like possibly not liking it. Yeah. So just have as much fun as you can, really.
And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's important for anyone to understand as well. Like, you don't have to start out by going, I have to buy an iPad and I have to do this. Like, you can just take a pen and paper and just start there if you have to. Do just something.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, everybody, that was Donna McAvoy. Again, fantastic 2D animator, illustrator, and motion designer. Make sure to check out her website at donnamcavoy.com, on Instagram as well at Donna ARGH, and finally on LinkedIn at Donna McAvoy. Donna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and just kind of letting all of us know like insights to animation, character design, so much more.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat and hear about. I'm not the only one who watches Love Is Blind, so good to know.
There we go.